that is something that, kind of opened our eyes as far as what we need to do as far as flows go, as well as the oxygen dynamics and what could be done to make this a more beneficial fishery and a more suitable fishery. Our communications, we have Facebook, Instagram, and our website. Obviously, that's not the right link there. The Facebook link is incorrect, but it's facebook.com/SalutaTU without the underscore. We post up events, meetings, news there, as well as on Instagram. Will Munhenke, our VP, runs that. And we also post things on salutatu.org. When the pop-up, if you go to salutatu.org and the pop-up shows up, if you put your email address and contact information in there, we usually do a monthly meeting reminder and try to send out a newsletter on any updates as far as conservation news within the state. I will say that I've noticed that our newsletters and our meeting updates, if you use Gmail at all, sometimes they will get filtered into your promotions tab. So if you are signed up and you're not getting them, definitely check that area. I know the holiday season is over, but it's never a bad time to gift a TU membership. If you know somebody who is interested in fishing, interested in the environment, interested in conservation, or is looking for a group to join, this is a great gift for them. You can go through and choose the options on the membership, how they receive it, and all that. If you go to gifts.tu.org/member/gift_membership, all that information is up there. It's a great birthday gift, great Father's Day gift, Mother's Day, anything like that. And that money, some of that money comes back to the local chapters to help with conservation efforts. All right, Keith, if you're there, if you would unmute yourself. And Keith is our new member chair as well as our outings chair, and he's going to take it away here for us.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for participating in tonight's meeting. I hope we don't take away from Ray's time here, but we would like to get those that are new members or those that are prospective members or visiting with us for the first time. If you'll introduce yourself, that would be very welcoming, and let everybody get to know you a little better. Anybody want to take on that challenge? If you do, unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Anybody?
Can you hear me?
Hello,
I hear somebody.
Did you hear me? It's Ron Morgeson.
Hey, man, how are you?
Been a long time.
Yeah, we've caught some trout together. Thank you for showing up.
Well, I wanted to sit in on this meeting because I'm interested in been trying to do some fishing on the Saluda, but it's been a little difficult. So I wanted to kind of hear what the gentleman had to say about the water flows and things that they're putting through the dam. So.
Okay. Well, great, Ron. We are glad that you're with us.
Well, thank you. Glad to see you.
Participate. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Garrett Yopsis. I'm
hey, Garrett.
Rivers. Hey, I've been a Trout Unlimited member since 1982, and I guess I'm a member of the Saluda chapter. Obviously, I'm not very involved, but Malcolm, thank you for the email to let me know about this meeting. I'm looking forward to hearing about the situation on the Saluda and ways that we can address that. So, and also Ray, I want to thank you for joining the group. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you for participating. It's good to have you.
Yeah, I'm new to the TU. I just joined in December, and this is my first meeting, and look forward to fishing some more on the Saluda. I went out a couple times and caught some little ones, and looking forward to doing some more later on.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your participation and membership. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is can you hear me? This is TJ from Charleston. Sort of I've been in the Saluda chapter for a few years, but usually got some kids in the background, so usually don't have a chance to actually chime in. But I'm definitely interested in hearing what you guys have to say about the Saluda.
Thank you, TJ, for your participation. That's great. We did hear you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Well, I will say this, our chapter's growing despite COVID. I wish we could all get together and just have great fellowship like we've always done, but you know, we're pushing between 900 to 1,000 members, and we're doing quite well. And what Jacob was saying about the gift of a membership, that's a wonderful idea. I purchased my grandson a little Stream Explorer membership. He's 9, and so he's beginning to get excited about that kind of thing, and hopefully he'll be a member for life at some point in time. So, but we're grateful that everybody's participating and joining, and hey, maybe one day we can all get together. Thank you.
That's hopefully the plan here. Hopefully, you know, eventually we'll be able to join back together again and, you know, meet in person. I did check earlier this week, and I think Monday we had 989 members in this chapter. So we are doing very, very well. You know, it's always great to see that number grow, and I appreciate everybody who has joined and is a member of this chapter. It you know, it means a lot, and we need everybody we can.
Yeah, we sure do. We've got some great folks, mighty good folks. I will say this about a couple of guys that I've come to know through our outings program, and maybe we'll get to that slide here in a minute. I don't know, but
no, if you have any updates on outings or anything like that, Keith, go ahead.
Okay. No, as far as overnight stays and outings, those are, you know, right now we can't do it. Those that participate in the outings, I think you know how we roll. We're a close-knit group, and we have a wonderful time together. But we're not, I can tell you right now, the makeup of our group, pretty well, we're not going to be following all those guidelines, and I'm not going to be responsible for it. But we hope that we can begin maybe later on this year, and with overnight stays. I encourage members to go online and to the chapter website, read our trip reports, and hopefully one day, if the good Lord will bless me with a nice retirement from AT&T, I can do a lot more of these things, and maybe we can get a few more people to do outings for us as well. But right now, everything's on hold, and we just can't do it.
We just have to be safe and protect our members at this point.
We've got to be safe. One other thing, we've got 2 outings participants and chapter members. One that passed away, a real dear friend, the commander, we called him, Phil Smith. He was a commander in the Navy down in Charleston, and he participated in a lot of outings with us. And he's left us now, but he was a good man. He was 85 years old, and he caught a lot of trout with us. And he told more stories than he caught trout, but he was a character, and we were going to miss him. And then we've got another chapter member, Dr. Mike Strong, who's a retired dentist from Denmark, South Carolina, and he's battling a very fast-moving disease. And we just sang happy birthday to him last March, You'll read that in the trip report. And in less than a few months, he's got a debilitating neuromuscular type of disease, and it's tough. And so Dr. Mike Strong's really struggling. So anyway, but that's what I have, and thank you guys for participating in tonight's meeting.
All right, thank you, Keith. As always, thank you for all your help and all the work that you do with us. And we would be half of what we are without you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob.
All right, moving forwards, conservation news. Obviously, this is what tonight's meeting is about, is the Saluda River water quality and flow issues. We will get into this as the meeting goes on, so we will just kind of skim over this for now. Our next cleanup event is going to be on Valentine's Day, so make the Saluda River your Valentine's. We'll be meeting Sunday the 14th at 10 a.m. down at the Riverfront Park. We are going to be following COVID precautions, so if you do show up, please wear a face mask and socially distance as much as possible. We will have garbage bags, cleanup gloves, and if you already have a SRTU volunteer shirt, wear it. If not, come down and get a free one and help us, help maintain the riverfront down there. I think we will be teaming up with some of the Columbia paddlers, so they will be picking up and hitting the river and picking up anything that they can get from their boats, and then we will be hitting the banks and the shoreline. So that is on the events calendar on the web page, and definitely please show up and fill a bag up. The last one we had was in December. We had a good turnout, and we pulled out a fairly decent amount of garbage off the banks. There's a little image down there on the slide of just one spot that I pulled stuff from. So every little bit counts down there. SCTU license plates are available through the SCDMV site, and then the low number reserve plates are for sale. If you contact sctuplate@gmail.com, they will let you know the availability and the purchasing info on those. And that money comes when you purchase a reserve plate. There's the purchase price, and then there's the DMV registration price. The purchase price for those reserve plates goes to the SCTU State Council and goes directly to conservation efforts within the state. We've already used that money to help start Burles Ford paving project, as well as the design of aquatic organism passages. So if you're interested in getting a low number reserve plate, definitely do it. That money goes directly to conservation efforts, and that money is already being used for conservation efforts. So it is a great cause and a great way to spend money if you're looking to. SRTU merchandise is available on the site. It's shipping. Go check it out. All right. Without further ado, our guest speaker tonight is Raymond Ammarell. He's been with SCE&G and now Dominion Energy SC for 27 years. His group handles dam safety, hydro license compliance, and relicensing for Dominion Energy. Raymond's here to discuss with us the flow regime, water quality issues in the lower Saluda River in 2020, and also give an overview of the factors they consider when they operate Saluda Hydro. You there, Raym?
I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate you doing this. Are you going to need a control of a screen for a slideshow?
I was going to try to share my screen if
Okay.
I could.
All right. See if you can do that.
All right. All right, I have a PowerPoint presentation up. Can everybody see it?
Looks good.
Did I lose my audio when I did that?
Um,
What happened?
I
I
can hear
tried to
you.
share my, okay, well, I shared my screen.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I shared it with anybody.
I see your screen. I see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I see your
Okay.
screen. I can hear you fine, Ray.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, great.
Yeah, everything's fine here. I can see your PowerPoint, and
Okay,
yeah, I can hear you.
okay, great. I appreciate you folks inviting me to speak. I don't have anything earth-shaking to tell you, but I'll just run through what we experienced last year with our operations at Saluda Hydro and the lower Saluda River. And try to give you a little bit of context, I guess, about what we saw and what we're able to do with Saluda Hydro and Lake Murray. So I wanted to start out by saying that 2020 was really a kind of a frustrating year for us as well as for you, your group, and the other Saluda River stakeholders. It was for a couple of reasons. It was a challenging year for us with our dissolved oxygen operations, and of course the flows were pretty high throughout the year. So there weren't very many good opportunities for wade fishing. And so the first slide I have up there is a graph that along the bottom shows the inflow and outflow. The inflow is blue and the outflow is red, and that's measured in CFS over there on the left-hand axis. And then up at the top, the darker blue line is the reservoir level, and that's read off the right-hand axis. So, and then the green lines are the old rule curve and the proposed guide curve that we have in our license application that's still pending. So 2020 started off a little unusual. In February, we had a pretty good sized flood come through the area, and it gave us about 45,000 cubic feet per second of inflow, which is a pretty good flood on the Saluda. And that's this spike over here on the left side there, got up to about 45,000, and we were releasing through that event about 17,000 CFS. So if I kind of zoom in on a flow graph for that flood, this is kind of what you see, the inflow in blue and the outflow in red. And so of course that resulted in a rise in the pretty abrupt rise in the reservoir level as we stored all the water we weren't releasing. And so that filled the lake up pretty quickly. And it was also a big flood on the Broad River and the Congaree River. The Broad River got to 120,000 cubic feet per second at the Alston gauge up below Par Dam, and the Congaree River got to almost 150,000 cubic feet per second in Columbia. And you can see the Saluda River down here. Saluda Hydro was chugging along at about 17,000 cubic feet per second. So this flood on the Congaree and the Broad caused, a lot of low-lying areas and the Riverwalk down in Casey to be inundated. There were a lot of pictures on social media of the light posts sticking out of the water with, 3 or 4 feet of light posts sticking out of the water during that flood. So it was a pretty good-sized flood, as what I'll call minor floods go in the river system. But so that was a pretty big inflow pretty high inflow event to start the year with. And then we had other, kind of repeated smaller decent sized events that came through as these frontal systems come through. It kind of spikes the inflow up to 12 or 15,000 cubic feet per second. And so it was a fairly wet and high inflow spring. And whether the larger event in February had anything to do with this or not is I'm not sure. But the low DO season started in late May, when the lake stratified very early, and the DO at the bottom of the lake dropped down to below the state standard around May 28th or 29th, and it usually doesn't happen. That usually doesn't happen until late June to early July. So it was at least a month early, and possibly a little more. So that was kind of our first clue that things were going to be unusual as far as water quality goes. So we opened our turbine vents and started our low DO protocols that we've been using since 2004, 2005 timeframe, which involves using lookup tables that give us a way to operate our units, basically spreading the generation over the units. So each unit operates at a low level and allows them to pull air in through the turbine vents. And so we found when we started doing that one of our units, Unit 1, was not venting properly, wasn't really pulling much air in at all. So we stopped using Unit 1. So that left us with 3 small units and Unit 5, which does have a vent and does have the capability to vent at low generation levels, and it actually does pretty well. And so we started mixing the other 3 units, and eventually started mixing Unit 5 in at very low generation levels to keep the dissolved oxygen up in the river. And we had I'll go to another slide here. So after May, right here between May and July there on that slide is where the DO dropped in the river, and we had some issues there and opened our vents, started operating, and as we had to, higher flows that came through, that caused the DO to drop because our units had to operate at a rate that wasn't allowing them to vent really effectively, and Unit 1 was not in the mix because it didn't vent properly. So, excuse me. So we had some sort of periodic dips down to the 4 milligram per liter range, and we eventually got sort of into a more or less happy place. We were still having to pass a good bit of flow because the flow throughout the year remained pretty elevated. Our average inflow through the whole year in 2020 was about 4,000 cubic feet per second. And in what I'll call a normal year, our average inflow since 2007 was a little over 2,000 CFS. So we had almost twice what we've experienced as an average since 2007. That was just some numbers I had handy. That's not a long-term historic average or anything. The long-term average in the Saluda has been around 2,400 over many years. So this isn't too far different from the long-term average. So and our average outflow for the year was almost 4,000 CFS. Also, it was 3,700 CFS, and our average outflow since 2007 has been about 2,000 CFS. So about 50%, almost twice as much. So obviously, the more water we have to flow through the units, using the vents, the turbine vents, to introduce the air into the flow, the less effective the venting is, and the lower the DO is going to be overall. And that showed up in our average overall for the year in 2020 was about 7.4 milligrams per liter, and our average DO since 2008 was 8.6. Has been 8.6 milligrams per liter. We've had a lot of very successful years venting over the years, and we've produced some pretty good DO with episodic issues when we've had to run more water due to rainfall events or hurricanes and things like that. So last year was the lower performing DO year than we've had in most years. And that was frustrating because there wasn't much I could do with the units given the higher flows that were coming to us. Most years there's a lull in the summertime where you get much lower inflows. We had a little bit of that in the summertime there in July and August, but the flows really didn't get low like they often do. And then we started getting, a few tropical storms that came through or threatened to come through. Sally was the main one here in mid-September, where we ended up drawing the reservoir down, and the rainfall didn't materialize as it was forecast to the degree it was forecast in the Midlands and the upstate. It did, it did materialize there elsewhere, but it didn't hit us as hard as they were forecasting for a few days. So as soon as it became apparent that we weren't going to get that rainfall, we stopped generating to that degree. And, the lake basically stayed there at that level, rose a little bit until later in the fall. And we had a couple of another tropical storm that came through, and, we ended up trying to manage the lake for that also. Towards Thanksgiving, the lake was mixing. We were able to keep our DO up. And so we were able to start dropping the lake as the weather got colder. And, by the end of the year, we were down close to 354, which is where we would normally try to be. The lake conditions appeared to be kind of different than they usually are. We noticed that the water coming through the hydro never really cleared up. It never got to be that nice clear water. It stayed turbid and kind of murky looking pretty much throughout the year. And we obviously noticed that our venting wasn't as effective as it sometimes is with the turbines. And so we were seeing that we were having lower dissolved oxygen levels in the river. And, there was some conjecture that maybe that high flow event in February, kind of washed or redistributed a lot of sediments and organic matter down into the lower reservoir. And that, had a higher oxygen demand. And that might have, been a contributing factor to the low DO conditions becoming evident early compared to other years. As far as the flow regime for fishing, obviously we were flowing a good bit of water. There weren't too many weeks of flows under 1,000 CFS. Normally in the summer and early fall, you get a lot of times where the flows would drop below 1,000 CFS, and it's good fishing, I would presume. But if you look at the USGS graph of the flows here, this is the same data for 2020, but just the USGS graph of it. So this is a logarithmic graph, so it all fits in one small space here. You can see there aren't too many times where the water was below 1,000. That 1,000 CFS line right there. There's some dips in there, but not too many, and not for prolonged periods. So the other thing that happened to us in the fall was that we had, I think this might be connected to the general condition of the water in the river and the lake. We had some coolers that clogged up on Unit 5, and we had to take Unit 5 offline for a couple of weeks while we cleaned those coolers. And that was quite a process, and the folks at the hydro worked really hard at that and got the coolers cleaned out, and they got a lot of organic matter and sediment type stuff out of the coolers. We've never had that issue before. The only thing, we can think is that that's some of that same turbidity and kind of murky, turbid water that was coming through the units throughout the year. And our cooling water intake is in the tail race for that unit. So it must have picked up a good bit of that stuff and clogged the coolers with it. They have very small passages like your car radiator does, so they clog up pretty easily, and kind of devilish to clean them. So they tore all that stuff down, got it clean, and when we got Unit 5 back online, we were able to get our DO back up a little bit again. So those are the kind of challenges we had in 2020, and it, as I said, it was frustrating for us. And in terms of the general quality of the river, it never really got to where we thought it should. The water quality never really improved like it usually does as the lake stratifies and you start getting, even though it's low DO water, it's usually very clear and free of sediment, and it never really did that. And really the river never cleared up really good until the lake turned over in the late fall. and the DO improved, and then the river conditions seemed to clear up and get back to normal. So challenging year, and like I said, we don't want to put low DO water into the river. We want to keep the river with good DO levels. It's not in our interest to fail to meet the state standards. So we had a lot of folks working very hard trying to figure out what's going on with the units, and we still do, actually, because we're still looking at Unit 1 and trying to make sure that we can do the best job we can to get the DO where it needs to be all year long. So that's about that's the information that I had put together for you tonight. And if you want to try to have a question and answer, I can do that.
Ray, it's Malcolm. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What's the status on Unit 1? You noted that it wasn't working properly. Is it repaired yet, or what's your plans to get it going again as far as dissolved oxygen?
It's not repaired yet. It's got a leak. It's got a leak in the head cover, which is basically the cover of the turbine, and it's got a steel around the edge of it. It's a big, massive thing, and basically the vent goes through the head cover, and so if the head cover has a leak, it doesn't pull as good a low pressure as it should, and we're looking at trying to get that head cover sealed this winter and spring, and trying to get that unit to vent properly. So we're trying to get a contractor in there to seal the head cover. We can't really remove the head cover at this point, but we can seal it with by pumping sealant in through ports, and we're going to try to improve the venting of that unit.
That's great. We appreciate you working towards getting that one going again. I know that was important.
The unit operates and it runs. It runs fine. It just it's perfectly good for service now, but it doesn't have good venting capability for low DOs. So it's
okay. And a follow up to that, I've often updated the chapter members on the turbine baffles that are in the settlement agreement as the ultimate solution. And those meetings when the settlement agreement was put together was, wow, what, 14, 15 years ago.
That's
Has
right.
anything new come up that's maybe even better, and have y'all considered
Well,
oxygen injection in the forebay?
well, I want to clarify turbine. When you say turbine baffles, we have hub baffles on the units now. Those were installed back in the early 2000s, and we've been using those. Those are just little baffles that are on the nose cones of the runners, and they help, pull a low pressure zone in and help the air get into the units better. What we talked about during relicensing and put in our license application was to upgrade the turbines with venting runners. And that's a runner that's, got hollow blades or other means to, entrain a large amount of air into the flow, much more than you can with the vents and the hub baffles. And there are, since that time when we executed the settlement agreement for the license application, there was basically one or two manufacturers with the technology for auto venting runners. Now there's several options. I went up to High Rock Lake in North Carolina in 2019 and looked at some turbines that GE was putting in up there, and they did a test of one of them, and it was very impressive. The whole tail race just about turned white when they opened the vents, and it was able to vent the turbine through the whole range of operations. So really, really good technology there that GE came up with for that. And thus far we have not pulled the trigger on those because we don't have the license yet, and we don't know what modifications FERC would make to our proposal. It's dragged on now for going on 13 years. And, it's frustrating for us. The last word I got from the Marine Fisheries, NOAA Marine Fisheries, was they were still working on the draft biological opinion regarding the short-nosed sturgeon. And the fellow was hoping to get the draft to FERC for review by early December. I don't know if that happened or not. I have to touch base with him now that we're in the new year and get an update from that fellow. But until that document goes to FERC, I think FERC's hands are tied. They can't proceed and issue the license to us.
I see. I think my other concern was I've got some striper fishing buddies and do a little bit myself up in the lake. And this year it looked like 25, 30 feet down was about all you had to go to.
Yeah.
Stripers. They weren't very deep this year, were they?
I heard that from a lot of folks that striper fish, and it was interesting because people said that I think the fish never really. I guess I don't know if they didn't congregate or they didn't disperse. I don't really know how they didn't behave the way they normally behave, but a lot of people told me they had a very unusual striper year, and it was very difficult to find them at times and to get on them. And I don't know if that is, again, sort of an indicator of something unusual going on in the lake last year. But it just seemed like there was a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence of sort of a non-typical year in the whole lake river system. And, like I said, one of the effects was that murky water. And I heard the same thing you did, Malcolm, that the fish were, they weren't in their typical places.
Right. And I think the other concern was that, for us in looking at the river, that meant that we really had some poor quality water, in the depths. Mm-hmm. But it also made me think about the liquid oxygen injection that was talked about back in the relicensing meeting, because that would actually help the stripers up there in the lake. And it's awfully expensive, but I don't know, are there any other ways to where you can improve both the lake and the river fisheries?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't really think we're headed in that direction at this time. We're still trying to, stick with our license proposal and hope that FERC can get us a license where we can,
Right.
install start installing the new turbines and start improving the DO performance.
Got you. So I need to change my terminology. Turbine baffles is not correct.
Well, the hub baffles are what we already have on our units, and they were we did put some divers in the tail race this summer to look and make sure that the baffles were still there and that the nose cones of the units were still intact and that kind of thing after 15 or so years since we last did that work on them. And, the divers were able to confirm that they were. So, with the units, everything seemed to be, other than unit 1's issue, the units all seemed to be in the same condition that they were. They performed very well in 2019. And then in 2020, we used the lookup tables like we usually do and noticed that we weren't getting the same output of DO from the hydro that we usually do. And I noticed it right away, and I said, boy, this isn't giving us what we usually get. So and then we started seeing the river stayed murky and all of that kind of thing. So
at what flow level, I know it's not a simple number, but at some point those flows increase and then the air vents just don't get the job done well. Is it in the lower 2,000 to 3,000 range, or is it more like 5,000 or 6,000, or where do we lose our efficiency?
You lose the venting at about 10 megawatts on each of the smaller units. So they vent really well when the units are just what we call spinning high side of 0 megawatts, when we're just barely generating power. And we do that sometimes at really low flow periods when you're in a kind of a drought situation. We run one small unit at very low load, and that passes about 500 to 600 CFS through the unit, and you get pretty good dissolved oxygen. Now, if you do that in the hot summer, of course, then the lower reaches of the river warm up, and that's not super good for the trout either. So you try to hit a kind of a happy medium where you can put out enough water to keep the river cool for a good length, and you can also keep your DO. But normally, if you run the small units at 10 megawatts each, you're starting to see the venting efficiency drop off.
What does that equate to in CFS?
10 megawatts is about 1,000 CFS per unit.
Okay, so 4. All right. And you ran a lot of 3,000 and 4,000 flows pretty steady through a lot of the summer. Are you actually able to generate and make some power, sell some power at that level, or are you just free spinning?
No, we make a little bit of power. I mean, we don't really rely on Saluda Hydro it's not a big revenue source. It doesn't make a lot of power. A lot of the times when I'm wanting to run Saluda Hydro, it's when the system doesn't need the power, like when you have a rainy period. So Saluda is primarily a reserve plant for us. We use it as a kind of a backup generator for our system. So if we have a problem with another plant, we can increase generation at Saluda, and it fills the gap until we can get another generation asset online or buy some power from another utility. So that's Saluda's primary role. So it's kind of to our advantage most of the time to not run a lot of water through Saluda. This year we just had pretty high inflows. Buzzard's Roost is upstream of us at Lake Greenwood. They have a fairly small reservoir and a pretty small powerhouse. So they can pass about 3,000 CFS through their whole powerhouse, which, we can pass through one of our small units at full load. So they fill up quick, and they end up having to open their spillway gates whenever there's a good rain event in the upper basin. And so when that happens, they kind of unload on Lake Murray, and we have two choices. We can either store it and release it slowly over several weeks, or if the lake is already full, then we have to increase generation and release it, kind of at the same rate they're giving it to us, so we don't get the lake over its, safe elevation. 2015 was a big eye opener for a lot of reservoir operators, and that flood turned into a historic event, and it resulted in us in SE&G opening the spillway gates for the first time for flood control since 1969. So that was a really unusual event, and it got a lot of attention from state regulators and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and kind of focused them on the importance of keep managing your pool level in advance of these kinds of storms. That one developed very quickly, and nobody had a lot of lead time to prepare for it. But it kind of focused everybody on, if you've got a storm coming with a significant rainfall event, you need to get your pool levels lowered. And so, DHEC and the governor often direct reservoir operators to, to lower the of these hurricanes and things like that. And if our pool levels are near full, as they often are in the summer and early fall, we try to, we comply with those.
Yeah, that's been a big concern of ours since the settlement agreement was put to bed. Was that you have this 2-foot band, and then you have these major rain events, and then you don't have generators that'll keep the oxygen or oxygen up at the high flows. So
that's exactly right.
That's a tough balancing act for you, for sure.
Well, it's been a big concern of ours too, and certainly back in 2008 when we put the license application in 2009 when we filed the settlement agreement, we thought by 2010 or 12 we would have a license and we'd be well on our way to starting those those turbine upgrades. And if that had been the case, by now we'd be getting pretty close to finished with all of them. Yeah, and it's been tremendously frustrating for us to not have the license issued, because it kind of leaves us in limbo. And let's face it, Saluda Hydro is not getting any younger as we go on through this waiting game here. And those units are 90 years old now, and they need a good going through, and it would have a lot of benefits for the resource to be able to do that.
I had a grandfather that was a pipe fitter that worked on building those things back in the early 30s. That's a long time. Is that right? Yeah. Listen,
my wife's grandfather worked.
I did want to say, Ray, while we had you here with the group, with an audience, that we're really happy to have your steady hand on the wheel. You've been involved in this for a long time, and I think we've always felt that you've had the interest of the river water quality at heart, and we appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that, Malcolm. I'm going to do the best I can. Believe me, I don't have the, I don't have any motive for, for not keeping the water quality good and the flow regime good in the Saluda River. So I won't say I was as frustrated as y'all were last year, but because I'm sure y'all were very frustrated, but I was quite frustrated myself because I put a lot of time and effort into
Yeah.
both the operation and the licensing measures over the years.
What question for you, Ray?
Yep.
Historically speaking, does it seem as if these the seasons are there's a greater amount of precipitation over the years? Does it seem like there's larger precipitation events historically speaking? And if so, is there plans to deal with this in the future?
Honestly, it seems to kind of go in cycles. You get a few years of a wet cycle, and then you'll get sort of a drought cycle. Our lowest inflow, our two lowest inflow years ever, basically since the project was put in operation, were 2011 and 2012, and those 2 years back to back were pretty much a drought of record for us in terms of inflow. The inflow got really low. It got down into the, kind of the low triple digits. I'll say the 300 to 400 CFS type thing. And that means that, the tributaries, we have 4, rivers that feed into Lake Murray. You've got the main Saluda, you've got the Little River, the Bush River, and the Little Saluda River. And all of those rivers in those 2 years, they reached, single digits in their flow rates, which is really, really low. So they were just a trickle. And, so that was, that was a very dry period. And then a few years later, you have 2015, where you have this historic, record-breaking flood that, at least in the Midlands of South Carolina, caused a huge amount of damage. And then, the year after that, you had Hurricane Matthew, I think in 2016, which, did a lot of flooding on the eastern part of the state. So I don't know. I haven't obviously been doing this long enough to, but from what I've seen of the inflow record, I think it comes in cycles. Are there any other questions I can answer? I apologize for my voice. I've got a frog in my throat, and I'm just trying to keep my voice together.
Yeah, I have a question, Ray. This is Mike Waddell.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, is it possible a couple of days out of the month you could drop the flow to 800 CFS so we could at least fish one day or a couple of days out of the month?
Yeah, I mean, it normally is. I did that at Jason Bettinger's request the weekend after they stocked. I dropped it down to around 1,000 at least, and let it sort of stay that way the whole weekend. And I put a notice out on the Lower Saluda page that we were going to be in the Blue Range, for that weekend. That was it. Like I said, Jason Bettinger said, "Hey, why don't you, if you're in a position to do it, why don't you do that to give the anglers a chance to, to get a crack at some of these fish?" And I said, "Yeah, it looks like, the weather will probably cooperate." And I might be able to do that again here pretty soon. We've had sort of, through the holidays, we had these back-to-back rainstorms, and you all know how wet it is. Your yards are probably as soggy as mine is right now. So every drop of rain that falls right now ends up in the rivers. But it looks like we're, potentially, knock on wood, getting into a little bit of a respite. And so, it's possible that we could, normally this time of year, we would cut back our flow and let the lake start to rise. And, we had an event that came through, a front that came through right there around New Year's. And of course, the lake started filling really quick. So I've been trying to kind of get it back down a little bit to to where it needs to be this time of year. But I think if the rain will give us a break, then I think we could certainly do that. I'm not opposed to that at all. And I talked to Jim Landreth, our VP, about it, and he didn't have a problem with it as long as we weren't putting ourselves in a hard spot with the lake level rising too fast or something like that.
So
Ray, quick question. The September event, we don't know the effect on the fish. I talked to Jason Bettinger at DNR, and he said they done one shocking, and they found one rainbow where they had found dozens in the past. But that's not really quantitative. Is there any way that you got an environmental group up there, biologists and all? Is there any way they maybe could help DNR a little bit and determine?
Well, they did. They actually sampled the day after DNR sampled.
Oh,
DNR sampled on September 30th, and our guys were out there doing their fish community survey on October 1st. The difference is the DNR goes out, and I think they only look for trout, and they hit the certain kind of the bars and stuff that the trout like, maybe the gravel bars and stuff like that. And our folks go out and hit some standard transects in the river, and they look for all the different species. And our biologist said he didn't recover any trout that day, but he said the visibility was terrible in the water. And Jason Bettinger said the same thing to me with DNR. He said the visibility was really bad. And he said, so some of the recovery issue that they had might have been due to the bad visibility, because he said, if I can't see them, I can't net them. And my biologist Caleb said the same thing. They recovered pretty normal amounts of other species, but they didn't recover any trout on October 1st. So,
yeah, the big concern is that, we had a multi-year fishery built up there. I'm still chasing what I call Walter, the 36-inch rainbow that ate my 15-inch rainbow.
Okay.
I wonder if he's still around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a couple of years to grow these fish, and the hatchery fish are not the brightest. The mortality is pretty high on them. They don't always revert back to the wild that quickly. So it takes a number of years to kind of build up and produce some wild fish. And we had that going for a while there. So
I understand.
That was probably our biggest concern. It's not just that we have to just restock the river. It's
I know.
going to take a few years,
Yeah, I understand. And and it's it is a trout put, grow, and take fishery. So the goal is to grow the fish and have them hold over from year to year. And I understand that. I guess, all I can say is it's a natural system under man's influence. So there's a lot of factors playing in, and not every, in any natural system, not every year is going to be a good year, and not every year is going to be a bad year. So,
we haven't given up hope, because I've done some shocking over the years with the Forest Service and the DNRs on the Chattooga. That's a big river, but we're able to pretty much cover it with 50, 60 volunteers, shocking and netting and walking across, and we can't do that on the Saluda. And I've had days. I remember one day Hal Beard, the biologist, sampled below the islands at 26 and just found a couple trout. I think maybe 2 or 3. This was quite a ways back, but my point is that I fished that day in the riffles, where he can't get his boat.
Yeah.
He's not shocking, and I caught 8 that day. Yeah. So getting a crew up there to actually shock that area is pretty tough. So actually, the fishermen's anecdotal tales are kind of important. It's about the only way to know. Yeah.
Jason did tell me, he said, the fish, a lot of fish could have been displaced also by the, by the flow, and they would have been, seeking out higher oxygen levels and moved downstream. And he said it takes them some time to redistribute. And he said, with the water having been murky as it was during that time, they may not have been eager to try to redistribute at that time. So he said he was looking forward to seeing what his spring sampling was going to look like.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
And
They'll
our,
find
and our
some
folks,
kind of haven and just hang there. Yeah.
yeah, and our folks do some shocking. They do the fish community surveys normally, and I think they normally do them in March in the spring. I'm not positive of that. Might be March, might be May. I can't remember. So our folks will be out there in approximately the same time frame that Jason is. So we'll see what the results look like. And our biologists did say, they send all that data that they get into DNR as part of the scientific take
Yeah.
permit that they have. So DNR gets all that data. And so, there's nothing, it's transparent. There's nothing private about that.
Well, we'll see how the spring goes. Hopefully the water will come down and we can both shock and fish, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that we can back off the flows from the hydro and give people some opportunity to get out and fish and let the lake rise at the rate it needs to in the spring, and not all at once, But
And we got stripers
anyway,
to chase because the stripers didn't die off this year, did they? They managed to
no, I
hang
didn't. I thought, I was thinking, boy, what an unusual year we're having, and I thought, boy, the next thing we're going to get is I'm going to get reports of a striper mortality in the lake, and I never heard it. I never did, and I kept asking people, have you seen any dead fish out there? We have folks who go out and do water quality sampling, and I said, do you see any dead fish out there? And they said, no, I haven't seen hardly any at all. So I said, okay, good.
Yeah, I know the striper club folks, they'll tell you real quick. They know they're out there every week.
Yeah, and the DNR folks have been real good about telling us over the years too, when they've seen them. And then we've got folks, our lake management folks go out and they do their dock inspections and all that kind of stuff. They ride the lake a lot. And so they've always been good about reporting, if they see more than just a few fish. You always see a few, whether that's angler mortality or what it is, but you always see a few. But they, if they see more than a few, they've always been quick to report it.
Did you all shock up any sturgeon when you were shocking?
Not that I was told about. I think that would have made the news. I don't think they shocked up any sturgeon.
This is Ron Morgeson. You said that you might be able to take a few days, and drop the levels so fishing so we can get in the water. Or in my case, I do a float, but I know I like to get the levels under 3,000. I think even for floating. So you say you can put that out on the site, and
we're actually there now. We're at 2,600 or something like that, I think.
Oh, are you? I hadn't looked.
So.
I know I have a friend, and he likes to get out, and we generally float at the 26 and go down, and so he's kind of been watching, but yeah, I guess. Do you generally?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're higher now. I'm sorry, we carried on with our we're at 4,000 right now. We were down at 2,600 something last week, but I'm really hoping to get down around 1,000, and be able to let the lake fill a little more and get the flows down in the river, so that everybody can get out there and enjoy it at a lower flow rate. We did have a overall pretty frequent high flows last year, so there wasn't much opportunity for that.
Yeah, I've been trying to get out since mid-November, and it's been pretty difficult because again, we've had a lot of moisture, I understand, but trying to get out and get a day's fishing in, and
it's not always tied to the rain here. It's really the rain in the upstate, and it moves across the middle of the basin that gets down here in a few days. And, you know, whenever you see our lake start rising fast, you know, we're going to have to do something in terms of releasing water. So, you know, if you watch the USGS site and you start seeing those Saluda River gauges up there in Williamston and Greenville and all of that start increasing, then, you know, we're going to get it.
It's coming, right?
It's coming. It's coming down the hill. So
yeah, right. Okay, well, I guess we'll just again, I go out to the USGS site and kind of watch levels and try to
sure,
you know, get an idea so that if I want to call my friend and say, hey, let's go. Looks like they're going to hold it off for a few days. We can make arrangements and get in a fish. So.
Yeah, and we have the Lower Saluda webpage, you know, on Dominion's website. If you Google Dominion Energy Lower Saluda River, you should get a hit that will take you to that page. It's the same page where you sign up for the automated rain down alerts for when we release water, you know, and it tells you we're going to the yellow range or the red range on your phone. It's that same page. And, you know, you just read the little acknowledgement and click the accept button. And, you know, one thing we did do last year is a very minor thing, but yeah, I got a lot of, I had got the year summertime when we were running multiple units at low load, that our flow indicator thing that shows, you know, what our flow was did not agree at all with the USGS. And I kept talking to our IT people about it. And so finally last summer, they were able to code in a link to the USGS site. And so our agrees with the USGS gauge for the first time ever. And because it's using their data. And in this day of cyber attacks and all that stuff, it took a lot more than I thought to just get that data imported and displayed on our webpage. So it was a minor victory, but I was happy to be able to do that.
Yeah, being an IT person, I can understand where you're going with that. You got to really put the firewalls in and be sure that you're not going to get an intrusion of some type. So it's not as easy as
and being more utility, we're governed by the North American Electric Reliability Council, which is NERC security standards, because they don't want anybody hacking in and taking control of a power plant or something like that. So we have to comply with all kinds of pretty strict standards. So they have to do a lot of reviews on all the data imports they do. So anyway, all that to say, it should have been done a long time ago, but it finally did get done this past year. And so our flow indicator thing should be accurate now, you know, or at least in agreement with the USGS, and they're pretty accurate as a rule.
This is Dwight Moffitt.
Hey, Dwight.
I heard you mention a few minutes ago about dropping the CFS to a wadeable level right after the river is stocked. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that not really a great idea in terms of giving the fish time to disperse and acclimate to the river, and not just alerting people to come clean out the river right after it's stocked?
I was asked to do it by DNR, so I assumed it was the right thing to do. I'm not sure what the philosophy is about. I know there's a lot of folks up in the mountains who watch the stocking reports, and they look for where the rivers are being, what streams are being stocked, and they go out there and hit them, you know, a couple days after they stock them, and they get really good catches. So I know I know people do that. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but you know, when Jason asked me about that, I said, well, yeah, sure. I think I can do that this weekend. So,
well, Dwight, too, this is Mike. Another reason to drop the flows after the stocking is those fish that come out of the hatchery have basically been in an aquarium their whole life. So all of a sudden, if you throw them into a river that's got 4,000 to 5,000 CFS, they're being flushed. Those fish don't know how to handle it right off the bat. So if Ray can drop the flows right after stocking to get those fish a little bit acclimated to the river before the flows go up to even 4,000 CFS, there's a better chance of them staying.
Yeah, that was one thing Jason pointed out. He and Ron Hall always told us this too in the past. He, wanted the flows less than 4,000 when they stocked, and asked us if we could to hold them, to below that level, for a few days afterwards, to let the fish get acclimated to the river. So, we've been in communication with DNR for many years around the stocking schedule and whatnot. And, they always contact us in early December and, tell us what their plans are. And we have a conversation about what the flow regime is and, what the best days would be to do it. I think the day they were planning to do it, initially, they got a kind of an ice storm or something up in Walhalla where the hatchery is, and they couldn't get I guess they didn't want to get the truck on the road in the icy weather, so he postponed it one day until the weather improved to get the truck or trucks down here. So, we had that conversation. So, I kept he tells me what day he's going to do it. And then I guess it was the weekend right after that is when we were keeping the flow low anyway. And I just dropped it. I dropped it extra low down to 1,000. But Jason did say that would give the anglers an opportunity to get out in the river. So.
This is Malcolm. Ray, I think that's the right answer that Mike gave. I talked to Jason a little bit about this, giving these trout a chance to acclimate. The problem we've had for years is that the strain of trout is so far removed from the wild. They've been bred in the hatchery year after year after year. A lot of them the same brood stock for 4 or 5 years. And we've even talked about, I brought a program back from Arkansas where they've used some cutthroat trout from Wyoming that are pretty close to the wild. And they find that the holdovers, holdover ratio rather, on those fish is much better. So to give those rainbows and browns from Walhalla a chance to acclimate is probably a pretty smart request from Jason. And again, unfortunately, they don't do well. Even if we don't fish for them, the odds of them surviving over a year with no fishing pressure used to be kind of quoted around the country as like maybe 15% of them will survive. And I think Ron found even much less than that on the river. Again, it goes back to this problem, it takes a few years to, kind of rebuild the holdover fisheries, and that's the ones that start spawning and so forth. One other thing too, to talk about flows might be a good segue for you to tell them a little bit about the settlement agreement and the recreation days. You sent me that chart last fall, and it's been so long now. I'm not sure Mike and I have kept them up to date on what that really entailed, but I thought it was a pretty major commitment because you guys were basically saying we'll guarantee these flows on these days, and that could be pushed in advance so people could plan a little bit. The way it is now, you pretty much just have to check the site and kind of hope, it stays at that level, or, watch and get out if it doesn't.
Yeah. So we, in the license application, we had sort of a recreational flow schedule that included a lot of wade fishing days. And then, quite a few days through the year with sort of low boating flows and medium boating flows and higher boating flows. So you get a range of flows out there for the paddlers, and, get a lot of days where the flows would be lower for wade fishing. And the other important thing about the wade fishing flows would be that during those days or periods, whether it's a weekend or a weekday or whatever the schedule was, we would take the plant out of reserve, out of the reserve lineup. So it would not be used as a reserve generator. So you could be out in the river fishing and not have to worry about, the sirens starting to go off and all of a sudden the water's starting to get on you and you got a vamoose. So that was something that the fishing community, was pretty vocal about during relicensing, was that, it makes for a much more enjoyable experience if you don't have to worry about the plant starting up and increasing the flow on you. So that was part of the commitment, was to keep the plant off reserve during those wade fishing flow days. So,
Ray, this is Bill Clendenin.
Hey, Bill.
I'd like to echo what Mike Waddell said about 800 CFS. 1,000 CFS from the dam is going to be 1,200 by the time it gets down to where we fish, because of the contribution from 12 Mile Creek. So
that's right.
If you do consider lowering the flows for a little bit, consider the 800, and then, because 1,000 just isn't safe to wade.
Okay.
Thank you.
Glad to have that information. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for what it's worth, we debated this for years. We had some of our older folks back in the day were lobbying more for a 500 or 600 flow instead of 7, but 7 is fine. 8, 9,000. Those of us, I waited up to about 11 or 12, and then I don't go in. So anytime you can get down that 700, 800 range, you're doing us a favor. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's usually a normal thing, through a lot of the summer. If you don't have a pretty high inflow year like we had last year, normally we're down at that. I can remember weeks and weeks and weeks where we've had one unit just running along at, 1 megawatt or half a megawatt or something like that, and just, chugging out 650, 700 CFS, for like a whole month at a time. And that's been the norm a lot of years in the summer. And this summer it was not, this past summer.
Yeah, for those of us that can remember back in the actually 70s, but 80s and 90s when we were down to 180 or less. I remember a few flows even under 100. So yeah, the droughts and the rainy seasons are extremes, and it makes it tough for you to deal with, but we appreciate all you do.
Well, I'll do my best with it, and it's always a balancing act, but I'll do the best I can. That's all I can commit to.
Well, we truly appreciate you coming on tonight, Ray, and sharing that information with us, and we appreciate your continued efforts to keep the water quality as best as you can do in the lower Saluda.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, talk to your group, and hope we have a better year in 21 in many respects.
Yes, 2020 will chalk up as just a very strange year.
Yep, all the way around, it sure was, and I'm hoping, obviously, like everybody, that 21 will be an improvement in many ways. So hope all of you stay well.
Yes.
And
You too, Ray.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ray, and hopefully, just keep communications open with us, and any sort of low flow events that are going to be planned out. Please
Okay.
share those.
I'll do it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ray.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, y'all.